What's going on, everybody? America Football Network here with another video today. And today we're bringing you our South Carolina preview and prediction. But before we get started, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Comment those thoughts and opinions down below. Help me reach that goal of 1,000 subscribers by the end of August. We are about 30 away. So help us hit that goal and hit that 1,000 mark right at the start of the college football season. We'll be doing a bunch of streams of big games this year. We'll be doing preview prediction videos for games all throughout the weeks leading up to them. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss a thing. And then also make sure you guys check out our shop. I'll put a card with the link here. Get yourself some cool merch, American Football Network merchandise. So check that out. But let's go ahead and get started with today's video. So the South Carolina Gamecocks last season went 8-5 overall, 4-4 in the SEC. Lost the bowl game to Notre Dame 45-38, but picked up some good wins. Beat Tennessee at home 63-38. Won on the road at Clemson 31-30. But they did have a few bad losses in there. Lost at Florida 38-6, lost to Missouri 23-10, and lost to Georgia 48-7, and lost to Arkansas 44-30. So they had, an up and down season. They got better as the year went on for them, sort of for the most part. But still very up and down all throughout the season. They lost 2 of their first 3 games, and they won 4 straight. Then to close out the season, they went 3-3. So, pretty solid season for them last year, especially when you look in terms of, what they've done in years past, particularly under Will Muschamp. So they're getting better, especially under Shane Beamer, as he is 15-11 in 2 years at South Carolina, heading into his 3rd season. And he returns 5 starters on offense this year, 4 on the defensive side of the football. They do return Juice Wells at wide receiver and Spencer Rattler at quarterback, as well as Juju McDowell and DeCarrion Joyner at running back. Joyner going to play running back, wide receiver, maybe even a little bit of quarterback. Who knows what they're going to put him at. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with Luke Doty this year as well. He's a guy, he's listed as a quarterback, but he's never really got an opportunity at quarterback for the most part. So we'll see if they put him at receiver or, some wildcat plays, what all goes on with him. But they got a lot to work with, but they definitely start out with a tough game in week 1. So let's go ahead and jump into the schedule for South Carolina. So in week 1, they get the North Carolina Tar Heels in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have this game as a loss. I'll just run through my thought process on it with you guys. I'm sure all the South Carolina fans will be mad, but we know where the real Carolina is, and that's in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So for when you look at the matchups, we'll go offense to start. When you look at North Carolina, better quarterback than South Carolina, much better running backs than South Carolina. North Carolina has 5-6 running backs deep that are just as good as South Carolina's running backs. When you get to their 4, 5, and 6, their 1 and 2 are elite. North Carolina may have the deepest running back room in the country. Then you get to their receivers. I know they lost Josh Downs, but they got some nice transfers, especially if that dude from Kent State can play. I know right now the NCAA is denying his eligibility, which is huge. But if he can play and get in by this time, he's got a little bit less than a month left. He's appealing it. Hopefully he can play for him. It'll be sad for him if he has to sit out this season after transfer and is technically a 2-time transfer. But they got him. They got some other talented guys at receivers. I think South Carolina has the best receiver in the game in Juice Wells, but I think North Carolina has the best receiver group, and I think it's not even really that close. Then you get the offensive line. North Carolina has a much better offensive line. South Carolina also has to replace 3 starters on the O-line this year. So I like North Carolina's offensive line. Also, tight ends are included in the wide receivers. We'll just call them receiving threats. And then you get to the defense. I think North Carolina's linebackers are better. I think the D-line, I'm a little bit torn between whose is better. South Carolina obviously has a little bit better recruiting there at the D-line in years past, but they lose a lot of people on the D-line. And you look at North Carolina, they have some good depth and some good experienced players on the D-line. So I'm going to call the the D line splits. And you look at the secondary, obviously North Carolina's secondary was just awful last year, probably the worst Power 5 secondary there was. So I'm giving the secondary to South Carolina, but we don't really know what either secondary is going to look like because North Carolina was terrible last year. They lost some guys in Grimes and Storm Duck, but they feel that they've gotten better by subtraction by losing those guys. And then you look at South Carolina, they had a pretty good secondary last season, but they lose their two cornerbacks in Darius Rush and Cam Smith. So those are big losses. I think that North Carolina's offense is going to be able to put up a ton of points. I'm not sure if South Carolina is going to be able to match that through four quarters. And so I think North Carolina will kind of control the game offensively, and that will be what ultimately decides the game. So I have a loss for South Carolina in that one. Then they get Furman at home. I have this game as a win. Obviously, Furman isn't going to be able to compete with a Power 5 team through four quarters. This may be a game for, a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half, but that's all you're going to get out of Furman, and I don't think it'll be that. I think it'll be kind of like the Georgia, not the Georgia State game, the South Carolina State game last year, where South Carolina ends up winning 50-10, something like that. Then they go on the road to Georgia. I have this game as a loss. I think it'll be very similar to last year, 48-7 loss for South Carolina. South Carolina's a good team. They're getting some more guys in. They got a solid roster with some talented guys, but they're not going to Georgia and getting the win. They're just not. Georgia is going to absolutely kill them. They're going to control the game on both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage, and they just have so much to attack South Carolina with. They're not going to be able to keep up, and the defense will basically shut their offense down, in my opinion. Then they get Mississippi State at home. I have this game as a win. This is going to be a higher scoring game for sure, especially if South Carolina's secondary is, what I kind of think it will be. Not a bad secondary, but a slightly below average to average secondary, because Mississippi State and Will Rogers are going to put up a lot of passing numbers this year. And so this is a game that I think can be very high scoring game. I think that, this is a game that is going to be up there, 40s, 30s for both teams. So I think South Carolina is going to have to put some points on the board in this one, but I think they will be able to against Mississippi State's defense. And so I have South Carolina getting the win in that game. Then they go on the road to Tennessee. I have this game as a loss. Tennessee, they lost last year 63-38, but if I remember correctly, they were up 38-34 whenever Hendon Hooker got his ACL snapped, or 38-35, something like that. South Carolina was pushing them. I still think South Carolina would have won that game, but I don't think it would have been 63-38 like it ended up being. I think Milton's in a better spot this season instead of just being kind of thrown in the middle of a game when on the road, when South Carolina has all this momentum. And so I think to go on the road to Tennessee, one, you're going to get a crazy environment. That's going to be a tough environment to go to. You're going to get a much improved quarterback in Joe Milton and what you saw in him last year, a guy who can really take the top off of your defense if the secondary has any sort of questions whatsoever. I think Tennessee will be much more prepared. Tennessee's not going to want to lose this game again this year, and they won't lose it. They will get the win. Then South Carolina gets Florida at home. I have this game as a win, a little bit of redemption from the 38-6 loss last year on the road. I think Florida is obviously a much worse team with Graham Mertz at quarterback instead of Anthony Richardson. And I think South Carolina is a better football team. And so I have this going as a win for South Carolina. Then they go on the road to Missouri. Missouri. What is Missouri going to be? They beat South Carolina at South Carolina 23-10 last season. I think Missouri is going to be a better football team this year, and I think they're going to be better than what most people think they're going to be. I think Missouri will have a pretty good season. I think they'll get to a bowl game 6-6, maybe even 7-5. We'll see. But I do think South Carolina gets the win. I just think they're, not a fluke game for South Carolina last year, but definitely one where they didn't play anywhere near what they're capable of. And so I think this year that they will play better and they will get the win against Missouri on the road. But look out. This could be a game that South Carolina definitely loses. Then they go on the road to Texas A&M. They beat A&M by 6 at home last season, but you're going to Aggie Land. I think A&M will be a little bit better than they were last season too. They could be even like they have potential to be a top 15 team. I don't think they will quite make that. I think they will finish in the top 25. Um, and so I think they're just a better football team. I think they're going to beat South Carolina. It's a road game for the Gamecocks. That one's going to be hard to really go there and feel comfortable about coming away with the win in that one. But I think A&M gets the win, so a loss for South Carolina. Then the Gamecocks face the other Gamecocks in Jacksonville State. This game is a win. Jacksonville State not going to be able to compete with a Power 5 team. I see this game kind of like the Charlotte game for them last year, maybe the Georgia State game where they won 35-14 or 56-20, something like that. I think Jacksonville State could be a solid, group of 5 team, as I believe they just made the jump up from FCS to the Conference USA, I think. One of those smaller conferences, but they're a group of 5 school, and South Carolina is not going to be able to they're not going to be able to compete with South Carolina. South Carolina hopefully will be able to compete with Jacksonville State, but I have a win there for South Carolina. Then they get Vanderbilt at home. I have this game as a win. They beat Vanderbilt by 11 last season. I think that they could beat Vanderbilt again this year, but I think Vanderbilt will be a tougher team than they were last year. I think Vanderbilt will be a little bit improved. I think Swan is going to be a pretty good quarterback for them. So this is a game to be, you can't just go into this game like you did the Missouri game, kind of overlooking them like you did Missouri last season. You got to be ready for Vanderbilt. I think South Carolina will, and I think they'll get the win. Then they get Kentucky at home. I have this game as a win. They beat them by 10 last season. By no means is this a guaranteed win. Devin Leary and Kentucky, they're gonna be a solid team this season, and I think that they could really put South Carolina to a test here. And I think that Kentucky could get the win, but I do think South Carolina, it's a home game. I think South Carolina is a little bit of a better football team, so I'm giving the Gamecocks the win in this one. Then they get the big rivalry game at home against Clemson. I have this game as a loss. I think Clemson gets the win. You look at that game last season, South Carolina won by 1 point at Clemson with, DJ completed 29% of his passes last season. Obviously, quarterback play is going to be better this year for Clemson. Offensive line will be better this year for Clemson. Receivers will be better this year for Clemson. Offensive play calling will be better this year for Clemson. And Antonio Williams is not going to fumble a punt at the end of the game that would have set up a game-winning field goal. So I think that, Clemson's going to be a much improved team this year. And I think South Carolina is going to be about the same. Now, this is a very tough environment, especially for a rivalry game. It's probably going to be either the 8 o'clock game on SEC Network or the 7 o'clock game on ESPN. Maybe it gets the 7:30 slot on ABC, but I doubt it. But it's going to be a night game, I would imagine. And so it's going to be it's going to be a tough environment for Clemson to play, and it's going to be a crazy environment. By no means do I think Clemson's going to go there and blow South Carolina out. I think it's going to be a very competitive team. I think if Clemson wins, they're going to win by 10 to 14 points. I think if South Carolina wins, they're going to win by 3 to 10 points. So I think it's going to be a close game both ways, but I do think Clemson is the better football team, the more talented team, and I think that they're going to be able to come away with a win. So that wraps up South Carolina's regular season. I have them going 7-5 overall, 5-3 in the SEC. Not a bad season at all. We'll see what bowl game they get. Maybe, they can pick up a bowl win this year. I don't think that they will get as good of a team as Notre Dame last year. So, we'll see what happens with them. But I think it's another solid season for Shane Beamer in year 3. But that wraps up today's video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Comment those thoughts and opinions down below. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and we'll see you guys next time.